No worries. So Harshal and I are going to be sharing a new feature called propagation. And basically, we're trying to solve the problem where you have a long, complex pipeline that involves multiple hops and transformations from Kafka to S3 to Snowflake. And you want to make sure that the data is being accessed securely and compliant everywhere, right? So in your data warehouse, you have Snowflake that already supports tag-based masking policies, but you have a cold start problem, right? So how do we make those tags get there in the first place? And then you have a maintenance problem. How do we make sure that they're also kept up to date as your data contents change? And like, how do we solve this in a sustainable way, right? And that's where DataHub enters. And it's a combination of auto classification, lineage-based tag propagation, and Snowflake tag propagation. With these type of actions, you can ensure that your data is automatically protected with minimal help needed from your data team people, which is like, we're all busy. So the more we can automate, the better. So we're going to go ahead and start with auto classification. Go ahead, share my screen real quick. And what you'll see here is a Snowflake table. And in this table, we have none of these fields are hidden, right? So we have sensitive information such as this address or phone number or any type of other information that you wouldn't have. And what we're going to do, sorry, it's the first time talking one of these things, I'm a little nervous. In this demo, we're actually going to be using Acryl DataHub, which has a lot of these capabilities already built in on top of DataHub, but we're going to show us how you can take advantage of these features in a powerful way, as far as adding a tag to downstream assets and having it propagate all the way through. Later, Harshal is going to be going through the individual Lego blocks that make up the solution, so you can assemble them yourself in the open source DataHub. So what we're looking at is currently we were at the customer 360 table, right? This is in Snowflake, and we actually wanted to see where are we getting this information from, right? So right now I'm in this S3 bucket called user registration events, and I found that this table is here. If I start looking at these columns, let me zoom out real quick, we're going to see that address actually comes all the way back to this original S3 bucket. And say we wanted to, from this original source of information, hide that address all the way in the S3 bucket. We can use the powerful classification library that comes in DataHub to run alongside metadata ingestion, the library that uses column names, descriptions, sample values, as well as other table method data to produce, sorry, the notes are wrong, to produce the different classification terms. Right now, this isn't adding a suggestion, but the data steward who's running this behind the scenes have asked me, hey, like we want to add this glossary term to this column and we can accept it or reject it. And if we add this glossary term, we're going to see that in the S3 bucket, it will then auto mask the field where it needs to be masked. So we accept this.
Also, Sam, I think there's a hidden proposal sitting under location.
Yep. I'm going to go ahead and find that one. There it is. And accept this. So we're going to accept this one. Correct. And if we come over here and also look at this customer 360 data asset. It'll load. We're going to see that in Acryl DataHub that these glossary terms have been propagated from the original table, the users table. Then, if we go back to our customer 360 in Snowflake, we will see that the address has been masked as expected because the glossary term has been applied to the column. Actually, there is a data issue right now in Snowflake where you have to refresh to be able to see the tag. But you'll see this glossary term has made its way all the way from the original S3 bucket and through the lineage. So user registration, cleaned user registration, users, and then all the way down into customer 360. So our Acryl instance has been provisioned with lineage-based tag propagation, which is constantly monitoring for new tags, terms being attached to these columns and using lineage to propagate this forward across column level relationships. What this means is that the moment you accept one of these proposals, which you just saw me do, all of the downstream columns that were directly and indirectly related to this column via and as this relationship will inherit that glossary term. So what happens if, like, in a couple weeks, somebody adds a new term or removes a term, right? The same thing will apply. The lineage tag-based propagation will run and subsequently update those tags accordingly, right? Similarly, if a new column gets added and that gets flagged to say, like an email address detected, a similar workflow could happen of the classification system proposing the term and on approval, the term auto-propagating all the way to the destination system. So these actions run, and as they're running and changes happen, all of the changes, they get propagated down where they need to be. So how do we manage these automations, right? Where do we create them? How do we determine what they're doing? And what we're working on building is an actual automation center, which will show all the different types of automations that you can create. And the new type of this are going to be propagation type actions. We will have some pre-made recipes. So you'll be able to do like Snowflake term, and some of these are like pre-made, so that way you can create them pretty quickly with some pre-made configs. And once they are created, you will be able to manage their current running state from this page. So we currently have Snowflake tag propagation and term propagation actions running, which these two together allowed us to move that glossary term from user registration events data set into that the Snowflake bucket. Since they are currently running, you can also stop them, and they will stop moving those terms down to their child lineage data assets. The next thing you could also do is say, hey, like, it has updated 10 of these assets, right? And actually, I don't want any of these updates anymore. We have the ability where you could undo those assets by clicking an undo button as well. You also be able to obviously edit these automations, delete them, etc., as you would. And in the same view, we'll also be moving in another type of automation, which is the metadata tests, which will also live here. And yeah, I think that's about it for my portion of this demo. Shashanka, did I miss anything?
No, great job,
Thanks,
Sam. And amazing first demo in Town Hall. Congratulations. So now you saw what Acryl DataHub allows you to do in terms of monitoring and automating all of these automations. We're now going to transition over to Harshal, who's going to show you the Lego blocks that were used in making this thing work.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
hey guys, sorry, I'm just
all
going to
work?
jump in really quick. Harshal, I want to do a quick time check. Just a heads up, we still have our case study that we need to get through. Not
Yep,
to
I
rush
will
you,
breeze
just
through
be
this.
cognizant. Thank you.
Yeah. So the core backbone of actually DataHub entirely is the metadata changelog and event logs more broadly. Shashanka does a great job of explaining this in his blog post on metadata architectures from a couple years back, so I won't belabor that point. But streams are really powerful. And by listening to the stream of changes that are happening in DataHub, there's tons of different things that we can do. You know, we can propagate documentation and tags and terms to downstream assets. We can propagate things back to Snowflake, as you just saw. We can also sync documentation changes or terms and tags to dbt if you make a change in DataHub. it will show up in your DBT repo. I demoed this a few weeks ago, or like at a prior town hall. The other things you can do, you can sync metadata across multiple DataHub instances or send notifications. There's no limit to the types of integrations or automations that you can build based on the core abstraction of a change stream. But managing change streams and doing this work of building automations based on them can be pretty tricky. And so we have a framework called DataHub Actions that makes it easy to do that. And this has been open source for a couple of years now. We have docs and in the public doc site for it, and you can check out the repo. Everything that you just saw in that demo with propagating tags to downstream assets and then propagating those back into Snowflake, that's all powered by DataHub Actions under the hood. And what's more, most of those actions are already open source. We've made a couple tweaks to them, but most of the functionality is already there. And what does this actually look like? Well, we have an action type that's a Snowflake tag propagation. You give it a config as well as a configuration of where your Snowflake instance lives, and the credentials to access it. And then the other piece you need is, where do we get the change log from? And so we need to listen to the Kafka stream. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward to configure this sort of thing yourself, and then you can run it with the CLI. And if you were to build a custom action, it's very similar. You give us an event handler that accepts an event or a change and does whatever you need to do with it, and the framework takes care of the rest. Things like tracking what events have we processed, making sure that we've if the processor stops and then restarts, we catch up on the events that we missed. All of these details the framework just handles for you, and so you don't really need to think about it. And this looks very similar to ingestion recipes, and that's intentional because it's actually the same thing in reverse. In ingestion recipes, we pull metadata from places and sync it into DataHub. Here we are sourcing metadata from DataHub and taking actions based on it and pushing those actions out to other DataHub instances, or to the same DataHub instance, or to third-party tools. As I mentioned, DataHub Actions is open source. Both of the actions that you saw demoed here are also open source, the tag propagation action within DataHub, as well as the sync from DataHub back into Snowflake. We've made some minor tweaks to those as part of the demo here, but we'll be moving those back to the DataHub Actions repo shortly. The thing that will not be open source and will only be available on Acryl Cloud is the UI for kind of managing these things through the automations page. Please leave questions in chat, and that's all I had.